What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Brain Power. This is episode 23, and joining me today is Austin Federa of DoubleZero. Austin co-founded DoubleZero. He is the former head of strategy with the Solana Foundation. So basically as crypto native as you can possibly be, has been in the space for quite a while, has built stuff in the space. DoubleZero is kind of one of the hottest things on the timeline right now. If you've been paying attention to the crypto Twitter timeline over the last week or so, they had their mainnet launch and also their token generation event. It was somewhat controversial. We dive into that on the show. We dive into what DoubleZero is and what they're building, why it matters, why it is one of the necessary pieces of infrastructure for us to actually take Web3 and build a truly global system of networks and a global decentralized financial system. And for us in the DAI space, the ability to have agentic AI on a permissionless, decentralized, and immutable basis. Very much looking forward to you guys hearing this one and appreciate Austin and the DoubleZero team for making this happen. With that being said, and without further ado, here is Austin Federa.
I'm trying to free your mind, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it.
You're listening to Brain Power.
Okay, hey everybody, welcome back. This is Brain Power episode 23. Joining me today is Austin Federa. Austin, thank you for jumping on the show. I usually force guests to do like a proper background on who they are, which I'm not going to make you do. I think you can if you want to. But I think all of my listeners who are going to be viewing this will be well aware of who you are. But just hit on the major highlights. Austin co-founded DoubleZero and is also the former head of strategy at the Solana Foundation. So a really, really awesome resume, and that's only covering two of the things. But what I wanted to start with today is hopefully a little bit different than the other interviews you've been doing recently. I want to give you a second to just like take a deep breath and feel really good about everything that's going on. Because
we're speaking right after the weekend of liquidation, so everything's peachy.
Yeah, well, this is bullet point 2 actually on my list. Is DoubleZero is now a 2-cycle token. So congratulations, you guys made it through a bear market, which is huge. 48 hours, but you did it. That was bullet point 2. You beat me to my joke. No, but all jokes aside, you guys have had a hell of a couple of weeks. So I want to dive into it. And I guess a good place to start, I hate to make you do this, but can you just give a quick overview on what is DoubleZero? What is this thing that's on everyone's timeline?
Yeah, certainly. So DoubleZero is this new project that we started about a year ago that is attempting to build a parallel internet to the existing public internet designed for high performance systems like blockchain. And the whole real point of this is, everything we've ever done in blockchain runs over the public internet. The public internet is a great resource. It powers, a lot of the things we use in our daily lives, except it doesn't actually. If you dig under the hood, pretty much every large major tech company, every large financial firm, every trading firm, they run massive private dedicated fiber networks alongside public internet infrastructure. So Facebook is the largest investor in Subsea fiber at the moment. You would not expect that. Facebook is a big public internet company, right? Well, it turns out that if you really want to serve people Instagram reels that load instantly anywhere in the world, you have to build a basically content delivery network parallel to the public internet just for this. Every Wall Street trading firm does the same thing because they need faster speed than the public internet provides and greater capacity and more direct routing. And so what DoubleZero is it is a project that's bringing this exact same technology to blockchain, but we're incorporating decentralization into it, cryptographic verifiability, multi-party consensus, many different independent operators, all the things that you would need in order to be able to trust a network like DoubleZero to allow basically validator networks and other high-performance systems to exceed what's possible on the public internet.
You have that down. That was an amazing synopsis. I read like all of your guys' docs this weekend. I spent a huge chunk of this weekend diving into the docs deeper, and wow, you nailed that. Okay, there's so much to unpack here. One of the things that I want to start with is, so I know as of today, something like 30% of Solana validators are running on your network. Is the network exclusively for Web3 projects and companies, or could it theoretically be used by anybody?
Yeah, no. So this is what's known as like an OSI layer 1, 2, and 3 network. So if you go back to your sort of computer science 101 classes, like this is very low down in the stack. And what that means, it's applicable and adaptable to pretty much any type of high performance system that could run on top of it. So that includes storage networks, that includes content delivery networks, that includes AI workload networks, anything that needs one of two things, ideally both, which is low latency dependable connections or really fat connectivity pipes. So in the case of Solana, like it kind of needs both. It needs low latency communications and it needs a lot of data transmitted. But even if you are something that's much smaller, right? Either you're a centralized L2 or you're just a trader who wants to arbitrage between central limit ordered books and decentralized systems, and you're sending, tens of kilobits around at any time to send transactions. Those are all different types of systems that are really well suited to DoubleZero. And then there's a whole bunch of other types of systems like storage networks, because storage networks, the cloud providers charge so much for bandwidth that a lot of decentralized storage providers simply aren't viable because of the ingress and egress fees that you see from Amazon and Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure as well. So those are kind of the two main characteristics that we think projects will benefit from, and that's in crypto and outside of crypto as well.
Okay, and my reason for asking is because this, as I pull on this thread more like through the lens of DAI, we have a lot of builders on the Morpheus ecosystem, on other ecosystems like BitTensor, like Venice, like Think Agents, a ton of other people who are trying to build the ability to have access to intelligence perpetually. And I love this idea of, okay, I have a agent, and I guess my future vision of this is I and you and everyone else will have their own agentic representation on chain that is immutable and permissionless. And part of that is going to be having enough throughput to allow these systems to actually function. And I can only, it feels like sci-fi in my brain to even think about the level of throughput that takes. And something like what you guys are doing increases bandwidth and reduces latency and allows you to actually make that type of system possible. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things we got outreach pretty early on from our decentralized AI companies that have said, hey, look, we are usually the second or third paying job in these bunch of these data centers. So when our model turns on and people get paid in tokens, and maybe that's less preferable to the data center operator, we have to do this big download. We got to go fetch the model. We have to pick the snapshot up for where things got left off. And oftentimes that's a 10, 15, 20 minute, 30 minute project to go download the new model. And all of that time, they have to either the data center's mad because it's not getting paid, or the project is overpaying for basically time when the machines can't be used when they're just downloading the latest snapshots. So there's all sorts of things like that where if you could just pull that in via 100 gigabits per second or 50 gigabits per second, that would be very different. You can't get that type of public internet connectivity through traditional networks.
And is DoubleZero permissionless today? Is there a KYC in order to be a user, or is it essentially private and permissionless?
Yeah, exactly. So the way right now we support the Solana mainnet as a permissionless system. And so the way we do that is if the IP address of the system is in Gossip, or if the validator is in the leader schedule, it's just provisioned through this service called Passport to be able to connect into the DoubleZero network.
Got it.
And then there's also other types of services that right now we call it mainnet beta, because not everything is in a permissionless state and not everything is as decentralized as we'd like the final version to be. But that's where we're doing custom onboarding for certain projects that are hey, I have, even if centralized projects, I have very specific needs. We'll talk to them and figure out what the best way to adapt and approve something is. But over time, the vision and mission of this is very similar to the experience of using a cloud provider today, where instead of showing up with a credit card, you show up with a wallet, but you show up with a wallet and you can provision services based on what you need anywhere in the world using the DoubleZero network. And we're not going to sell you servers ever, right? It's always just going to be connectivity. But you might say, hey, I have a need to move a bunch of data over the next 20 days from here to here. I just want to pay for connectivity to do that. And there's actually no way you can do that on the public internet or even private fiber today. You can't there's no website you can go to that's like, hey, give me, I need to move like 2 petabytes from this data center to this data center. Like, can I get some temporary fast dedicated bandwidth?
Yeah.
There's no way to do that.
No, yeah, absolutely. I believe it. Well, and also, ideally, like you were saying, on a decentralized basis, that's also permissionless. And like, I look at all these things through the lens of the line I use pretty frequently is any intelligence that can be controlled or shut off by force will be.
Yeah.
And so I need systems that allow me to access intelligence, allow me to access value and all these other things in systems that both cannot and will not and cannot, more importantly, be shut off by force. And this is just another layer to that stack. But what I love the most about this, Austin, is a lot of people. So I've been in crypto since like the 2017-ish timeframe.
Sure.
I've seen a lot of things come and go. Certain things have been really sticky, other things haven't. So many projects have taken the approach of we're going to build something new that's Web3 native and bring it to like a Web2 audience or a Web2 client base. You guys said we're going to find the most, not even Web2, Web0. Yeah. We're going to find like the lowest possible denominator for the internet and bring that to Web3. So can you talk about where did that come from? Like, who was the first person to sit there and say, you know what, your Silicon Valley moment. We're going to build a new internet.
Yeah, 100%. So it's actually kind of a bit of a funny story, but I was working at the Solana Foundation the last 4 years, and we were working on the Firedancer project with the folks at Jump. And the goal of this thing was 1 million transactions per second on mainnet. And we kept kind of hearing like, okay, we can build a validator client that can do this, but we're not going to be able to run it this fast on the public internet. And things like, okay, like, why? What's going on here? Can't we just get everyone faster pipes? Like, pay, instead of them buying a 1 gigabit connection, they're going to buy a 10 gigabit connection. It's like, well, you run into some fundamental issues with how the internet routes traffic. It doesn't route it directly, so you have the very circuitous routes that packets take. And when data arrives out of order, that problem becomes exponentially bigger as the data rate increases. A little bit of data arriving out of order is not that big of a deal. If it's a low data rate, but if you going up to 1 million transactions per second and a bunch of data is arriving out of order, that suddenly becomes a really big problem. And so that was one of the main things that we sort of like realized in this process was, okay, we're going to have to find some way to exceed what the public internet is capable of. And there were a lot of different versions of this that was from, what if the Solana Foundation spun up a new global fiber network? It's like, well, okay, but it's run by the Solana Foundation. Why would anyone trust it? You run into all these types of problems. And so I was talking with, Kevin Bowers at Firedancer. He's the chief scientist over there who leads that project. And he was like, I talked to this guy in 2016 who was trying to build a dedicated network for crypto, but crypto was just too slow back then. It didn't make any sense. All the exchanges were super terrible. And the fastest thing was Ethereum, which had 30-second blocks, and you don't need dedicated fiber for 30-second blocks. I wonder what he's up to. You should go talk to him. And this ended up being one of my co-founders, Matteo Ward, who had just sold his carrier that he'd spent a few years building in Latin America and was sort of on beach rest and was like ready to dig into something again and had no crypto experience. Same with Andrew McConnell, my other co-founder.
Really quick, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but that is the best place to find a team of people.
Yes.
So many of the core contributors of Morpheus were pseudo-retired before deciding to come back and say, let's build this thing. Sorry to cut 100%. You off, but I just had to make that note. It is like the best place to find a team of people who know what they're doing and are passionate about it and have the time to say, let's build whatever the thing is.
Yeah, it was really awesome to see. So one of the big components of that for us was like, okay, we've got the team now that can do this. Can we actually go out and build the thing? So Andrew like worked on the exchange side before coming over and working on the trading firm side. And so for him, he spent the last 7 years building the trading network that Jump, trades on and moves data around on. And so for him, he's like, we've done this before in a single party system. We've built one of the world's most performant private fiber networks. Can we build this like in a decentralized way? And so, this kind of really impressive team is how we've been able to get this thing launched in less than a year.
Yeah, which by the way, like I've seen much simpler Web 2 centralized businesses take considerably longer to go to market. And so the speed at which you guys ship this is very, very impressive. On that point, can you talk about how big is the connectivity currently? If I remember correct, it's on like 5 continents already.
Yeah, if you go to doublezero.xyz/dashboard, you can actually see all 70 fiber links in the network live in real time. You can see their speed, their latency, their jitter, their capacity. Soon you'll be able to see who the actual contributors are to them as well. And that's kind of like that's all the fiber network at the moment. Like it's pretty interesting to see, and it's also this is kind of one of the cool pieces. It's all powered by on-chain data. So we actually have a blockchain under the hood that's running the DoubleZero ledger. And what we do there is that's where all of the smart contracts that control tunnel provision, IP address provisioning, all this access control stuff is all actually running on a blockchain.
Is that a native blockchain to 00?
Yeah, it really is just a utility chain. Like we're not
Got it. Okay.
Users will never be able to deploy smart contracts on it or anything along those lines. It's just that blockchain happens to be the most perfect system of accounting humanity's ever created. So like why would we not use that as the underlying basis for this?
Sure.
And so the cool piece about all of that is it means anyone can verify that the links are doing what they say they should. If you're looking at sending a transaction, from let's say Singapore to New York, you can see exactly how long that should take on the DoubleZero network. That's something you can't see on the public internet. So this gives you much more transparency and much more sort of direct accountability than you would see on the public internet. And that's really what this is about. Plus, there's a lot of technology we can use on DoubleZero that simply is not available on the public internet.
Yeah. Did you guys, when you were looking at like where to connect first, basically in terms of geography, how did you narrow down those sites? Because the first thing that comes to mind for me is if you're trying to capture global value, there's probably like 20 cities on Earth maybe that if you capture them, you have some extremely high proportion of the total amount of value being transacted. But I'd love to hear about that. Like how did that happen?
Yeah, so the main thing for us was that it's very, I wouldn't call it easy, but it's the centers of concentration for stake, there's not too many cities that are involved in that. But that's not really enough for us and for DoubleZero. What we're trying to do is make it possible to run validators outside of this sort of narrow band in Europe where most validators run today. And so that's kind of like a major value proposition of DoubleZero is like, I'm not sure how familiar you are with like Solana roadmap stuff, but like multiple concurrent leaders is this idea that you can have two blocks being built simultaneously in different parts of the world. That needs a network like DoubleZero to be able to operate on. And that's when you start to see decentralized systems being able to outperform centralized systems. There's all this centralization pressure now where whether it's from Hyperliquid or Fogo or even other new validator sets or centralized L2s, you basically are trying to compress the market into as small of a physical location as you can. Like if you think about it, New York Stock Exchange, where is the market? Like physically. You mean
like physically? It's in not Camden. It's in New Jersey. It's right.
Secaucus, New Jersey, right? But
it's Secaucus. Yeah.
The physical size of the New York Stock Exchange is probably like 500 square meters.
And
inside that 500 square meters, all of the matching, all the information services take place. On an L2, it's probably within like 5 square centimeters between the RAM and the CPU on one server somewhere because it's a centralized L2. What happens right now in a network like Solana or any basically single point of source smart contract network is you have a hyperlocal market that's still about 5 square centimeters, but it moves around the world constantly. And so the goal with multiple concurrent leaders is suddenly you have 2 of these being built at the same time. And so in a centralized model, when a market event happens, it ripples out from that central server. And so your live die is your speed to talking to that central server if you're a trader. The minute you start to get 2 blocks being built concurrently at the same time, you suddenly have 2 centers of the market, which means the average of the market's now actually in the middle between those 2. And so, you could say, oh, I'm going to co-locate next to one of these block builders. Just in this hypothetical world, we only have 2 validators and they're both building blocks. Well, you're going to be as late as possible 50% of the time. 50% of the time, you're going to get the freshest information possible. 50% of the time, you're going to be as late as you possibly can by locating there. You can say, oh, well, I'm going to locate just perfectly in the middle. Okay, well, then you're going to be 25% equally disadvantaged. And so where does DoubleZero come into this? Well, the same place that, the traditional financial markets use high frequency fiber and other types of services for is the edge in the market is how fast you can communicate information relative to your competitor.
Yeah.
And so if I can be a millisecond or a nanosecond faster than you, I will always be able to outtrade you. Assuming
Yeah, basically, you guys are the Flash Boys. You're the Web3 Flash Boys. Although I hope Michael Lewis does not write a book about you, because so far we're 0 for 1 on solid crypto books about Web3 companies from Michael Lewis. But I digress.
I think the real moral to the story there is Michael Lewis is a lot more wrong about everything than people thought.
Yes, agreed. No, solid author, but yes, agreed. But no, all jokes aside, good storyteller. Yes. Great way of framing it, yes. But all jokes aside, I mean, that completely makes sense. I completely see why there is a need for that. I think you guys are really smart for identifying this opportunity and then also going for it. I'll admit, Austin, I have been a Solana hater in the past. I've changed my tune on this actually quite a bit. If you go sift through my X, maybe 3 years ago, it was probably different than it is today. And there's been a lot of reasons for this. One of the major reasons, though, there's kind of two, really quick. So I was fortunate enough to have a brief conversation with Anatoly one time where we were basically going back and forth on levels of decentralization. And the point that he was making to me is not all things need the same level of decentralization all of the time. I agree. I used to not agree with this. I do now agree with this. And two was just because something exists, basically, Solana is making the trade-off of our hardware capabilities to run a validator are more challenging. We believe hardware is going to get better, faster, more available, and therefore we'll be able to scale. You guys are a living embodiment of that because you're literally building it. And so my tune on this has changed a lot over the past couple of years. A lot of respect to you guys and everyone else building, within the ecosystem. Okay, we covered a lot of the good stuff. There's a couple other things I need to address.
Yeah.
You made people big mad a little bit on Twitter. Do you want to start with the fun side of big mad or the less fun side of big mad? We'll start with the fun side.
I feel like I've been making people mad on Twitter for years at this point.
Okay, but you, Austin, have made people mad on Twitter. I mean, DoubleZero has made people big mad on Twitter. So the first is you committed the cardinal sin of creating a metric. How dare you create TCV? How dare you, sir? I now need to know a new metric, and so does everyone else on Twitter, and they're big mad about it. Can you talk about what is this? Like, what does it mean? Why did you guys create it?
Sure. So this stands for total connected value. So if you think about it, DoubleZero is not a smart contract layer one the same way you typically think it. So in crypto, we've used this sort of proxy of TVL, total value locked. And TVL is a pretty poor metric, right? It's like GDP. GDP is also a pretty poor metric. But how do you think about how much value is connected into the DoubleZero network? What is the sum total of all of the stake and validators that are choosing voluntarily to operate on the DoubleZero network? And how do you come up with a metric that scales across multiple blockchains and multiple networks? Because you have to remember, this is not just a Solana project. We will be supporting a bunch of fast L2s. We'll be supporting other L1s. We'll be supporting all sorts of other things into the future. And so we either get this long laundry list of 30% of Solana and 5% of Sui and whatever connected onto the list, and it gets to be a very hard thing to think about and reason about. So instead, you can say there's 30% of Solana connected in to DoubleZero, or you can say there's $23 billion of value connected to DoubleZero, choosing voluntarily to operate on the network. And so, look, the ultimate clearing headspace in crypto is US dollars. Yeah. Everything is denominated in US dollars. Every pair trades against stable coins denominated in US dollars. So it was just, why don't we set up our units of accounting in US dollars as well?
Got it. That makes sense. No, that absolutely makes sense. And it also translates to other things. Like, as I imagine that over time, Solana will not be the only client to DoubleZero. There will be many other things on the network. And so that's a good way of saying, okay, we need a catch-all way of measuring how much value is actually going through our rails, basically.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
I'm a fan of creating metrics because the show Brainpower is also named after a created metric. So our good friend and core contributor to Morpheus, David Johnston, who, by the way,
Hmm.
shout out David, he actually coined the framework for the DApp in 2013. Total legend. But
Wow.
he wrote this article last year on quantifying brain power when looking at large language models. And basically, he made the argument that humans like you and I can process approximately 3.33 tokens per second if we look at our processing the same way you'd look at a large language model's process. And so to
Yeah.
measure a large language model's brain, like collective brain power versus an individual or a group of individuals, you'd have to measure its output in terms of 3.33 tokens per second. And so you can quantify, and basically the thesis was that in 2025, cumulative AI agents and cumulative large language model brain power will actually exceed cumulative human brain power this year, which I believe it already has technically by that metric,
Sure.
which was also a created metric. So I appreciate that very much.
Hey,
Um,
look, you got to remember, all metrics are created. Some are
yeah,
adopted.
you can just do things. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so on to the other big mad, which is definitely a little less fun, but for sure worth addressing. There were people with lots of questions surrounding the token launch and things
Yeah.
about how the token launch happened. Long story short, a bunch of people on X are mad that they didn't instantly get rich from spot buying 2Z the day of launch.
Yeah.
So can you dive into a little bit though, like where are we at with the token and like anything you are able to share in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, let me start off by saying, like, yeah, I'm mad that didn't happen too. That would have been great for everyone.
That would have been nice, yeah.
Yeah, so we did our previous token sale at 7.5 cents per token over the summer via CoinList, and this was a sale to validators and validator operators. We set out to sell 1.5%. We only actually cleared about 80 bips of that. So our last round did not even sell out. So
And
we
I will
went and
also
basically-
verify, by the way, really quick. I will verify that this you had to be a validator because I tried to sign up for it and was not a validator. So they did have checks and balances, just to be clear.
Yes, this was well controlled. And so we had no indication there would be this amount of demand for it. It kind of blew us away. The exchanges had not estimated this much demand for it. We did not get the sense this was going to be quite as hot of a launch as it sort of ended up being. And what happens in those situations is you get concentrated markets in one area. Binance opened something early, and liquidity providers basically were not able to plug in the way they should have been able to. And so we kind of saw a bit of runaway pricing take effect. This is something we tried very hard to prevent by working with any exchange that wanted to list the 2Z token, making sure they had all the information necessary to do those listings. And I think broad-based organic price discovery is the goal, and we fell short of being able to hit that goal. I don't think that was necessarily a fault of ours, but what happened in the market was definitely not that, at least in the first, opening hours of the market.
Sure.
So,
When I saw that you confirmed via tweet that the selling was not VCs, it was not team
No,
insiders,
everyone's
it was
locked.
not. Yeah. So everyone
Yeah.
who people are big mad at are not. You're pointing it in the wrong direction. It sounds like.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where we were concerned that the foundation trying to sell into the market would be seen as negative. In retrospect, if we had done something like that, it actually probably would have controlled the price run up much, much better. But the regulatory world we exist in, like this all actually dovetails into the no action letter as well, which, we received a no action letter a few days before the token launch from the SEC, which is we're the first project in 4.5 years, a crypto project, to receive a no action letter. It's a huge milestone for us and for the industry. That really takes this like very wide gray zone and makes it a little narrower, and that's like all you can ask for in crypto law these days.
Yeah.
But part of the provisions of that, as you can expect, is when you have something like that pending, you don't want to make any big moves. You don't want to announce anything major. And so by the time that came in, there wasn't even enough time before launch to try and organize something like initial sale from foundation as well, and that stuff being undisclosed would rightfully be seen pretty negatively by the market. And
Sure.
but the foundation has not done any selling. The whole team, all the founders, we're all locked. VCs are all locked. contributors are locked. It's this just situation where, unfortunately, we think everything has changed with the new administration, and a lot has changed on the executive side. The laws are still the same. And so what we really need are like clarifications from Congress for projects to be able to feel confident launching in ways that maybe are more beneficial to everyone involved, but are not really allowed under U.S. law.
Sure. Are those locks publicly available in terms of like what the timing is?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a whole token disclosure PDF. This is where everyone got their FUD from, is literally the documents that we put out. Yeah, so there's a whole token disclosure PDF that shows all the unlocks. Like most projects that have launched nowadays, there's a 1-year cliff on all the unlocks, and then they go linearly over the next 3 years, so 4 years in total for that.
Got it. Awesome. Yeah, and I urge anybody with concerns to check that out. What you guys are doing and just tokenizing anything, it's hard. I think people have this idea that there's like this one perfect way to do it. And especially to your point, with the regulatory framework that we have or maybe don't have in the United States and these amount of gray areas that exist, it's really hard to get it exactly perfect. And yeah, I mean, from what I can tell, you guys have made a legitimate effort to do what you believed was in the best interest of the project, the best interest of the investors, and ultimately, like, what matters now is what happens going forward, and like, you guys are building what you're building. So it's
the best way to launch is when no one knows what you're building. And
right.
So
well, that's what made Bitcoin so special, right?
Or even Solana from that perspective, right? Solana was under $1 for I think a 9 months, a year after it launched.
That makes me want to die a little bit, but yeah, keep going.
Yeah. Then it went back to $8. Opportunities here in Solana. Then it went back to $8. But I think this is sort of one of those things where I think what we were hoping to do with this was launch before we had so much excitement, and just turns out the market was in a very different place than we understood it to be. Yeah,
totally. Well, and now, like I said, we just got a refresh button, the shortest bear market of all time. We're back. You can ride up only from here after last weekend. We'll see. But what's funny too is, speaking of last weekend with just the price action and everything, it is really crazy to see that we're still in a place in crypto where like singular tweets about things can move the markets to the tune of the largest flush of all time in terms of like real dollar volume. And I often wonder, at what point, like if the goal here is to build these financial systems and these tools that I like to think of it as, that Don Draper meme where the guy's like, I hate you, and the other guy's like, oh, I don't think about you at all. Like, that's what I want Web3 to get to in terms of existence compared to Web 2, is this idea of like, we're not reliant on the Web 2 systems and these things that happen. And what you guys are doing is akin to that. Is like, oh, the public internet's down. Yeah, we don't even think about the public internet. Like we have our own internet at home, only it's not, the knockoff version. But anyway, yeah, thank you for addressing that. I know it's one of those things that like no one wants to sit on a podcast and have to be like, hey, yeah, people are pissed at us because, like, again, we didn't have the token launch that we exactly wanted. One thing I will say though, go ahead.
I was gonna say, at the same time, like, this is the point of a podcast. Is like, there's lots of people in your audience who probably have the same question, and so you'd be remiss not to ask it.
Yeah. Oh no, I definitely was going to ask you, like, for sure. Yeah. You were going to hear it. But one point I'll make is, I had the pleasure a couple years ago of talking to some of the higher ups at Compass Real Estate. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them or not. So they had an IPO that did not go as planned a couple years ago, and they basically IPO'd like exactly into the downtrend of everything. And so I got to talk to a couple of the higher ups there, like right after that had happened. And the point that I brought up to them, and I think it's relevant for you guys as well, is some people will have a crazy, amazing IPO. People start selling, people get complacent. Great. We had our exit. Awesome. All the values accrued were gone. For the people that don't have that, what is a more motivating factor than saying, all right, well, we better deliver the value now because like all eyes are on us to make this thing happen. And I feel like you guys are kind of in that boat, which is a good place to be.
Yeah, I mean, there's also just like some very practical things too about like I left a very high paying job at
Sure.
Solana to like come do this. And it's just kind of this very funny thing where it's like if you were gonna run a pump and dump, there's a lot easier ways to do it than building a global fiber
Yeah, how
network.
many pump.fun
Like
Austin Federa coins are there? Let me look, actually. I might spin up the first one while we're talking.
yeah, it's just this very funny like perspective to be like first off, like I'm a US person fully doxxed, like
Yeah.
good luck getting away with anything. It's just like there's all these. It's very very funny when you sort of look at like what some people's sort of accusations are around stuff. Like we have an incredibly like reputable team that all comes from like top tier backgrounds. Like there's just we're all locked, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also like these are also nameless, faceless people on
Oh,
the
of course.
internet. Like as
Yes.
as you're well aware, people will find a reason to be mad or mean to you on X.com with no qualms about finding a
That is
reason.
true. Yes.
Well, okay, so let me ask you, Austin, now that you guys have launched, you've had like a week, I guess, to digest it a little bit. Can you talk about like what are kind of the next steps? Like what are the things that you're now focused on post launch,
Yeah.
like early growth?
So we're expanding the network as we speak. So we have 11 independent contributors. There'll be a bunch more fiber links coming online through the end of the year. That'll greatly expand both where you can connect to DoubleZero and the capacity we have available for these systems. And so we're looking at onboarding additional networks as well. So the folks at Shelby have chosen to run Shelby storage on DoubleZero. Shelby's this new storage protocol that Aptos and Jump are working on together, and that'll be launching sometime next year. But that's built on top of DoubleZero at this point. There's a whole bunch of AI companies that we're talking to that are interested in data transport through the network. And one of the main things that we're working on is this prioritized data product. And what this really does is this you mentioned Flash Boys before. This basically allows traders operating on DoubleZero to pay to always move over the fastest fiber link. Because we have,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, we have like a lot of fiber across the Atlantic and across the Pacific. They're not all the same speed, right? Some are slightly faster than others based on either the composition of the fiber or the exact undersea route that it takes. And so the difference between 80 milliseconds and 100 milliseconds is not meaningful for consensus. It is very meaningful for a trader. And
Sure,
so,
yeah.
this is kind of where fees come into it too, is that we expect this to be a pretty attractive product for traders that are trying to get to like a Gito node as quickly as possible, or they're simply trying to like they send two transactions out. One is going to hit Binance, the other is going to try and hit the Solana leader to try and run an arbitrage between those two things.
Can you talk about what does that look like in practice? Like, will I be on, let's just say, my desktop, and I'm almost imagining like a VPN switch, and I'm like, okay, now
Yeah.
my IP address is here, and it's like now I'm on DoubleZero fiber, but I wasn't before. Obviously, I don't think that's how
Yeah.
it'll work in practice, or
No,
is that
no, I
literally
mean,
how it'll work?
I mean, that's not terribly dissimilar from it. So the one caveat I would say is it's probably not you at your home that's doing this. It's your trade server that's running programmatic operations that's doing
Got it.
this. So the way that DoubleZero works is if you're located in a data center where DoubleZero is available, it creates a software tunnel through the local data network into the DoubleZero device. And so at that point, you go ahead and say, hey, I want to, connect. I want to connect into DoubleZero. And computers are really good at figuring out what is connected and what is not connected. So they do a bunch of this stuff automatically. But if then you say, hey, I need to go talk to these two different servers, and you may send some of the data out through DoubleZero, some through the public internet, depending on what's reachable on both systems. And then the data basically races to those two locations. And so sending stuff over DoubleZero, if the other thing is on the DoubleZero network, it'll always be the fastest pathway to go over DoubleZero. And so that's kind of where we're getting connectivity into the same data centers where, in Tokyo, like all of the exchanges run their exchange infrastructure. So if your trade server is located in, say, Chicago, and, you're trying to run to a server in Tokyo to get an order in on Binance, and then also you're trying to run to Amsterdam because that's where a block is being built right now, you may take both of those transit paths over DoubleZero. But this is all for trading that happens way faster than a human clicking.
Yeah. Well, in our world though, I think most trading, well, it kind of already is a lot of like algorithms, but it's going to be agents. Like
Yes,
people
yes.
will have agents trading on their behalf. And in pretty much any competition of intelligence, whether that be literally transacting value or just transacting information, if I look through the lens of an agent, like if I picture an agent like a person, well, that has agency, it will want the fastest route.
Yes.
It will say, oh, I can
course.
be faster and better than all of the other agents. This is great. This is how I'm going to do it. Have you guys figured out what's the economy of scale where this makes sense for someone to build like their infrastructure on? So for example, if I remember correctly, I think YouTube also has their own fiber. YouTube, obviously massive. So have you guys figured out like what's the economy of scale where it makes sense versus somebody trying to literally buy their own fiber? I guess why do more people not do this? Like why don't other companies do this?
Well, trading companies do this, right? They do, but they do this for traditional centralized markets. And the reason that they do this for traditional centralized markets and they don't do this for things like distributed markets is because they need to wire up too many locations. There's not really that many core financial centers in the world. You need 10 fiber routes to sort of get to all of them. That's very much not the case when you're talking about blockchain, right? Just Solana, there's over 300 data centers all around the world that stuff's running. And so at that point, you kind of have to say, okay, well, like if I'm going to try and get, access to this and everything, like how is that work? That's a pretty big ask. That's a pretty big task. So at that point, there's just too many locations for anyone to try and wire up themselves.
Got it. All right. Well, Austin, I've taken up a bunch of your time today. I really, really appreciate it. Do we have any final send off or any message for the DAI builders of the world out there from DoubleZero?
I think really the thing to think about is, are there areas where lower latency or higher bandwidth would be useful in your applications and systems? And if the answer is yes, and especially if you're running in a data center, we'd love to talk.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Austin. I really appreciate you jumping on, man. Seriously, couldn't thank you enough.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm trying to free your mind, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it.
You're listening to Brain Power.